Hey you, have you ever paused in the midst of life's chaos and asked yourself whether something is missing? In the noisy, bustling city, among hundreds of thousands of faces passing by, or even amidst countless interactions on social media, have you ever felt a strange loneliness, a sense of emptiness, a burning desire for a truly deep connection that goes beyond likes, fleeting comments, and surface-level conversations? We are living in an era where everything seems optimized for efficiency and speed. Information is overflowing, technology connects us to every corner of the world. And yet, the paradox is that the feeling of disconnection, the feeling of belonging to something greater, seems more scarce than ever. We take pride in reason, in science, in the ability to explain everything objectively. So why is it that in a world that exalts rationality so much, we are still so powerfully drawn to things that seem irrational and deeply emotional? Think about these moments. A full-blown rock concert, tens of thousands of people shouting together, waving their arms to the rhythm. In that moment, all personal barriers seem to dissolve. You are no longer a solitary individual, but part of a collective current of energy, a sense of belonging so powerful it makes you tremble. You scream, you dance, you feel liberated, able to be your truest self in the most intense way together with strangers who somehow share the same heartbeat. Or a football final, where an entire nation holds its breath with every pass of the ball. When a goal is scored, millions of people burst into cheers, tears, and hugs. National pride, joy, or heartbreak are shared so deeply that they create an invisible unity with extraordinary power. It transcends all boundaries of status, age, or even political views. Everyone becomes one. Even think of the launch of a brand new tech product. Hundreds of people lining up from the night before, waiting through the cold or heat, just to be among the first to own a new phone or tablet. There is suspense, a sense of anticipation, and when the product is unveiled, a surge of collective excitement erupts. It's not just an object, it's almost a symbol, a gateway into a new world you want to belong to immediately. Isn't this also a kind of modern ritual? Those moments, even without scriptures, no clergy, no divine apparitions, still give us a feeling that I'll boldly call it sacred. A connection that goes beyond the self, beyond ordinary relationships. We crave those experiences, seek them out, even willingly pay a high price for them. Amazingly, more than 100 years ago, a great French sociologist, Émile Durkheim, saw this coming. He did not find answers in grand cathedrals or intricate doctrines, but in the most primitive forms of religion in humanity, in the most distant indigenous tribes. And he offered a bold explanation, one that will completely change how you see society, community, and even yourself. In the classic book The Elementary Forms of Religious Life, Durkheim argued that the longing for the sacred and for communal connection is not a leftover of the past, but an inherent need deeply rooted in our social nature. He believed that society itself, not some supernatural deity, is the ultimate source of what we call the sacred, of rituals and symbols that bind people together. So what did Durkheim discover among those distant indigenous tribes? And how can those discoveries help us better understand today's sold-out concerts, high-stakes football matches, or even those electrifying iPhone launch events? Let's dive into Durkheim's revolutionary worldview to lift the veil on the unquenchable human thirst for the sacred. Today, we will embark on an intellectual adventure together, a journey of discovery not only about a book, but about how we understand ourselves and the world around us. When mentioning the title, The Elementary Forms of Religious Life by Émile Durkheim, many of you might think, oh no, another dry philosophical book about ancient religions. But trust me, this book is not just a historical document. It's a compass that helps us reorient how we perceive society, and even ourselves in this modern world. Émile Durkheim. Sounds serious, doesn't it? In fact, he is one of the greatest minds, a true architect of modern sociology. Picture this at the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th, when science was reigning, when people tried to separate everything in order to study it as objectively as possible. Durkheim did something incredibly bold. He did not search for human nature in individual psychology, nor in metaphysical philosophy. Instead, in a surprising move, he plunged into the earliest forms of religion, believing that there we would find the basic DNA of society, how communities form and maintain their cohesion. And here lies the heart of Durkheim's argument, and the reason why this book is still so impactful today. Religion, according to Durkheim, is not about God or a mysterious supernatural realm. It's not about whispered prayers in the dark or commandments carved in stone. Instead, religion is the way society becomes conscious of itself and worships itself through a system of shared symbols, rituals, and practices. It is the mirror through which a community sees its own greatness, its cohesion, its transcendent power. Religion is not the creation of some external god, but a reflection of collective energy, of the solidarity that people create when they gather together. In other words, society itself is the god that humans worship, and religion is the language that this god uses to speak to itself. Hearing this, you might still feel it's a bit academic and distant, right? Don't worry. The goal of this video series is not to make you memorize every page of Durkheim's old text, nor to give a dry lecture on the history of ideas. Instead, we will use his groundbreaking insights as a master key. A key to unlock different doors in our modern world. We will not just summarize an old book. We will decode modern religions, things you might never have considered religions. From the passionate fandoms of K-pop groups, where fans create rituals, symbols, and shared beliefs to bond with each other, to corporate cultures with venerated core values and team-building rituals that are not so different from religious ceremonies, and even nationalism with its flags, anthems, and myths treated as sacred, where an entire nation worships itself and constructs meaning for its existence. We will see how ideas of the sacred, of community, of symbols that Durkheim identified among Australian Aboriginal tribes are still alive and powerful in our lives today. This is not just about understanding Durkheim. It's about understanding ourselves, how we create meaning and build cohesion in an increasingly complex world. Let's explore how this social DNA is encoded and how it operates in every corner of our daily lives. Ready? Let's dive together into this fascinating world. Core question: what is religion really? Welcome to my channel. Today, we are going to embark on an intellectual adventure, a deep dive into one of the most fundamental aspects of human beings and society: religion. And our guide is none other than the great sociologist Émile Durkheim, with his classic work, The Elementary Forms of Religious Life. This topic is not only important for sociology majors, I believe it also opens up a completely fresh perspective for anyone who wants to understand more deeply how we construct meaning, build community, and maintain social order. The central question for this first chapter is, what is religion? Really? Sounds simple, right? But think about it. Whenever we talk about religion, what's the first image that pops into your mind? Most of us, when we talk about religion, immediately think of belief in some god or supernatural force, some afterlife, don't we? We associate it with concepts like God, the soul, heaven, hell, miracles, a belief that goes beyond what science can explain. But is that definition broad enough, comprehensive enough, to explain all the phenomena we call religion around the world? Does it really capture the essence of what humans, from ancient times until now, have experienced and called religion? Durkheim and many other thinkers argued no. Defining religion based on belief in the supernatural is too narrow. It leaves out too many important aspects and even excludes some major belief systems that we still recognize as religions. Think of early Buddhism. I'm not talking about Buddhism after it developed and integrated into many different cultures, but Buddhism in its earliest forms. Siddhartha Gautama did not claim to be a god or a supernatural being. His original teachings focused on self-liberation from suffering through practice, meditation, and understanding the Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path. The goal is to attain nirvana, a state of peace, the cessation of suffering, not a specific supernatural realm to pray to or a deity to worship. There is no concept of a creator of the universe or an afterlife in the traditional sense. And yet, everyone acknowledges Buddhism as a major religion, with a profound influence on billions of people around the world. This shows that belief in the supernatural is not a prerequisite, or at least not the only factor to define religion. If we cling to that outdated definition, we will miss a large part of the picture, and lose the chance to understand what is truly happening in society. We need a new lens, a broader and deeper approach to grasp the full complexity of religious phenomena, and this is where Durkheim steps onto the stage with a bold, revolutionary proposal. He defined religion in a way that I believe will change how you see it forever. He said, "Religion is a unified system of beliefs and practices relative to sacred things, that is to say, things set apart and forbidden." Sounds complicated, doesn't it? But let's break it down together. First, he says religion is a unified system of beliefs and practices. This means religion is not just a collection of isolated ideas. It is a structured whole, including what we believe beliefs and what we do practices, rituals, customs. These beliefs and practices are interconnected, forming a complete framework that gives meaning and direction to the life of the community. The second key point, and the most important in Durkheim's definition, is the phrase sacred things, that is to say, things set apart and forbidden. The word sacred here does not necessarily mean divine or supernatural in the way we usually think. It refers to anything that a community decides to set apart from everyday life, assigning it a special meaning, reverence, and surrounding it with boundaries and taboos. Imagine this: our lives are divided into two broad realms. One is the world of the profane, the ordinary. These are the things we interact with daily in a practical way, with no special reverence. The desk you are sitting at, the book you are reading, or the meal you just had, all of these are profane. We can use them, change them, even throw them away without feeling guilty or blasphemous. But then there are other things. Things that, when we encounter them, feel different. They are set apart, placed on an altar, surrounded by silence, respect, and explicit or implicit rules. These are the sacred. It could be a religious symbol like a cross or a Buddha statue. It could be a place, such as an ancient temple, a church, a holy site. It could be an animal the community believes has special meaning, a specific holiday in the year, or even an action or phrase only allowed in certain contexts. The important point is that they are seen by the community as different, higher, and requiring a special attitude. Taboos come with them: you must not touch, must not speak disrespectfully, must not walk past carelessly. The sacredness does not lie in the object or action itself, but in the meaning the community assigns to it. An ordinary rock can become sacred if the community regards it as a holy place. Religion, according to Durkheim, is precisely the relationship, the separation, and the interaction between these two realms, the sacred and the profane. It provides a framework for people to understand that difference, and how to live in harmony and respect toward what they consider sacred. So why did Durkheim study religion? His goal was not to criticize or refute any religion, nor did he attempt to find out which religion is superior. Durkheim's aim was to find the most elementary forms of religion. He wanted to peel away all the complex layers and later developments of major religions to get down to the root, the unchanging essence, the core that all religions share, regardless of where and when they exist. He wanted to understand where religion comes from, why it exists in every human society, and what its basic function is for community life. To do that, he focused on Australian Aboriginal societies, specifically the Arunta tribe. He chose these societies not because they were more backward, but because he believed that their social and religious forms remained in a more original state, less mixed, less obscured by the complex developments of large civilizations. Just as a biologist who wants to understand life would start from the simplest cells, Durkheim wanted to understand religion by studying its most basic manifestations. This approach allowed him to build a solid foundation for explaining the origin, function, and role of religion in maintaining social order, in binding individuals together, and in creating a shared consciousness and shared morality for the entire community. So in this first chapter, we have reset the problem. We have abandoned the narrow definition of religion based on belief in the supernatural, and instead embraced a newer, more sociological definition from Durkheim. To repeat, religion is a unified system of beliefs and practices relative to sacred things, that is, things set apart and forbidden. And we have also understood his intention, to seek the most elementary forms in order to reveal the enduring essence of religious phenomena. This will be our guiding thread for the rest of our discussion in the upcoming chapters. In the next chapter, we will delve more deeply into the specific things Durkheim found in indigenous societies, and how he explained the emergence of the notion of the sacred. From there, we will begin to reveal the mysteries of how religion truly shapes our lives and our societies. Don't miss it. Dividing the World: the Sacred and the Profane. Welcome back to our series on Émile Durkheim's classic book, The Elementary Forms of the Religious Life. If in Chapter 1 we explored why Durkheim searched for the elementary forms of religion, then today we will dive into what he actually found. And this is a division that seems simple, but is in fact the foundation of every religion and every social organization: the distinction between the sacred and the profane. Durkheim asserts that the most general, most fundamental characteristic of all religions is not belief in deities or complex rituals. It is the division, the splitting of the universe into two completely different and opposing categories, the sacred and the profane. He believes that there is no religion, whether primitive or modern, that does not establish this basic division. It is the very first boundary that humans draw to understand their world. So what is the sacred? Let's set aside the common notion that sacred means good, holy, or noble. For Durkheim, the sacred does not necessarily have to be good, nor does it have to be evil. It can be either. It is simply whatever is placed by the community outside the sphere of ordinary life, separated from the everyday world, and protected by taboos and strict rules. In other words, the sacred consists of things that you cannot touch, use, or speak of casually without consequences. It can be an object, a place, a time, an action, or an idea. The crucial point is that it is not inherently sacred by nature. It becomes sacred because the community assigns that meaning to it, because the community decides that it must be treated in a special way, with reverence or even fear. Conversely, what is the profane? The profane is our world. It is everyday life, work, food, money, ordinary relationships. It is the world in which we can use, calculate, exchange, and interact in a practical and relaxed manner. These are things we do not need to handle with excessive care, which are not surrounded by special taboos. You can use a chair to sit on, a bowl to drink water from, without thinking too much about any deeper meaning. The profane world is the realm of logic, utility, and familiarity. The key point here is between the sacred and the profane there is an absolute boundary. They cannot mix, cannot be confused. A thing is either sacred or profane, and when something moves from the profane to the sacred or vice versa, it usually requires a ritual, a transformation at the level of the community. To make this easier to visualize, let's look at a few examples that Durkheim might also have had in mind, or that we can clearly see in modern life. Think of a flag. A simple piece of cloth, any color, bought at a market. That is a profane object. You can use it to wipe a table, to shelter from the rain, to play with. No one cares. Its value lies only in its material and function. But when that flag becomes the national flag of a country, instantly it enters the realm of the sacred. You cannot casually step on it, scribble on it, or burn it without being condemned or even severely punished. The material value of the two flags may be the same. The profane flag might even be more expensive, but the meaning that the community assigns to the national flag has turned it into a sacred symbol, representing an entire people, a history, a pride. Taboos are established to protect that sacredness. Or a ring, a beautiful ring of gold or silver. You wear it for decoration, you change it when you no longer like it. That is a profane piece of jewelry. Its value lies in the precious metal and aesthetic appeal. But when that ring is exchanged in a wedding ceremony, it becomes a wedding ring. It is no longer just a decorative object. It is a symbol of vows, of eternal love, of union. You cannot casually take it off or throw it away without deep implications, without cracks in the relationship. It is protected by a whole set of social rules, by expectations of fidelity and commitment. The wedding ring becomes a sacred object within the realm of marriage. The difference does not lie in the physical nature of the object, but in the meaning and value assigned to it by the community, along with the behavioral rules imposed upon it. For Durkheim, recognizing this division is the key to understanding religion. Every religion, no matter how ancient or modern, big or small, has a clear distinction between what is sacred and what is profane. This division is not just a cultural feature, it is a fundamental classification of the universe. It is the first way that humans organize the surrounding world, creating order out of chaos. In fact, you can see this division in non-religious aspects of our lives as well. There are values we consider sacred and do not want to see violated: honor, friendship, truth, freedom. There are sacred spaces: an ancestral altar, the resting place of a loved one, a quiet library that we feel must be kept silent. These things are not necessarily tied to deities, but they are still surrounded by taboos and special respect from the community. This is not just a dry academic concept, but the way we organize and understand the world, and the meaning of our own existence within a community. This very division creates boundaries, creates order, creates shared values that allow us to live together and share a culture and a belief system. It is the foundation of social cohesion, which Durkheim always places at the center of his research. So we have together laid the first brick in understanding the basic structure of all religions, according to Durkheim, the division between the sacred and the profane. But the question now is, why does this division exist? What causes something ordinary to become sacred, and why does the community collectively uphold these taboos? That will be the topic we explore in Chapter 3. The origin of the sacred. Hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss it. Goodbye, and see you in the next video. The origin of the sacred totemism. In the previous chapter, we explored a foundational concept in Durkheim's thought, the division between the sacred and the profane. We saw that this is not just a simple classification, but a fundamental line that shapes the entirety of human social and spiritual life. Every religion, every belief system, from the most complex to the most simple, stems from this separation. Today, we will enter Chapter 3 of the book, The Origin of the Sacred Totemism. This is an extremely fascinating chapter, where Durkheim takes us to a unique social laboratory, a faraway land in Australia, to find the deep origin of the sacred-profane division we just discussed. He wants to discover where the sacred truly comes from, and how it is created in communal life. Why totemism? So why did Durkheim choose totemism, particularly that of Australian Aboriginal peoples, as the starting point for this search? The answer lies in his methodology. Durkheim believed that to understand a complex phenomenon, we must look for its simplest, most primitive form. Just as a biologist studies stem cells to understand the development of an organism, Durkheim searched for what he called the elementary forms of religious life. And the totemism of Australian Aboriginal peoples is precisely the simplest, purest religious form he could find. It has not yet been complicated by vast pantheons of gods, by deities with detailed personalities, by massive doctrines, or by splendid temples. It resembles a pure version of religion, not yet mixed by thousands of years of history and cultural development. Australian Aboriginal peoples at that time were considered among the most primitive societies, preserving early forms of social organization and belief. This is the perfect laboratory for Durkheim to dissect and find the core of religious life, to see where the sacred is born. What is a totem? It may sound unfamiliar, but in reality, the concept of the totem is very close to the life of the clan. Basically, a totem is a symbol. It is usually an animal species, for example, kangaroo, dingo, kookaburra, or a plant species such as a certain tree or fruit. This symbol is not just the name of the clan, but much more than that. It is the embodiment of a sacred force, some anonymous energy that the entire clan feels. The totem is not merely a material symbol. It is the focal point of reverence and supernatural power. Every member of the clan has a close connection to the totem, even regarding themselves as related to it by kinship. For example, a kangaroo clan will believe that they originate from the kangaroo and that they have an inseparable spiritual bond with this animal. The totem is a special entity. It is not only the origin of the clan, its mythical ancestor, but also the soul of the community. It is both in the natural world, and yet carries a force that transcends nature. The sacredness of the totem does not lie simply in the animal or plant itself, but in the meaning that the community assigns to it. Key discovery: God and the clan are one. And here is where Durkheim presents his key discovery and insight that can change the way we think about religion. He realizes that in totemism, the deity and the clan are essentially one. The symbol of the divine, that is, the totem, is precisely the symbol of the community. In other words, when they worship the totem, they are not merely worshiping an ordinary animal or plant. They are worshiping the collective power itself, the unity and the very soul of their clan. The sacred power they feel does not come from some completely separate, supernatural entity outside of society. It arises from their own social interactions, from their own solidarity, especially during collective rituals. The power they attribute to the totem is the sum of the energy, emotions, and beliefs that the whole community produces together during ceremonies and emotional gatherings. Imagine a major clan ceremony. Everyone dances and sings together, performing traditional rites. In those moments, an enormous collective energy is created. It is so strong that it seems to go beyond each individual, enveloping them all. They feel as if they are connected to an invisible, sacred power. And that intangible power is precisely the manifestation of their own community, projected onto and bound up with the totem symbol. The totem is a symbol, but it is not the symbol of a conscious, personified God with a complex story, as in later religions. It is the symbol of an anonymous, invisible power, and Durkheim shows that this power is the power of society. The sacred is not an innate property of the totem. It is assigned, created by the power and consensus of the community. It is precisely the ceremonies and rituals of worshiping the totem that create and reinforce the sacred profane boundary. When they gather, separating themselves from everyday life to honor the totem, they are creating a sacred space. Everything in that space is sacralized, placed on a different level. Objects associated with the totem, actions in the rituals, all become sacred. Meanwhile, things unrelated to it, everyday subsistence activities, are profane. This may sound strange, but think about it for a moment. If the sacred originally is only a projection of social power, then might it be that the symbols and values we worship today, whether a national flag, an ideal, or even a powerful brand, also carry within them that same social substance? Are we still unconsciously seeking and creating our own modern totems? That is a thought-provoking question. This is only the beginning of the journey to uncover the social origins of religion. In the following chapters, Durkheim will delve deeper, analyzing rituals, magic, and the role of community in shaping belief. We will continue to dissect and discover surprising truths about the nature of religion and society. Don't forget to hit like if you found this video helpful. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss upcoming content, and leave a comment below if you have any thoughts or questions. I really look forward to hearing from you. God is society. It sounds strange, doesn't it? God is society. A statement that may sound blasphemous, or at least absurd to many people. But Durkheim, with his astonishing sharpness and logic, lays out this idea so convincingly that it will haunt you long after you finish listening. Durkheim says that the force human beings worship under the name God or divine powers, the entity to which we attribute supernatural power, omniscience, and the ability to control everything, is in fact the power of society. Let's analyze this more deeply to understand how Durkheim arrived at this bold conclusion. First point: society has transcendent power. Think about it. Society exists before each of us is born. When a baby is born, it does not naturally know how to speak, think, or behave. The child is immersed in a pool of rules, values, and traditions that have existed for thousands of years. Society is already there, and it will continue to exist long after each individual has left this world. The power of society is immense. It can impose moral rules on us that we can hardly resist. Consider social norms, what is considered right and wrong, the behaviors that are accepted and not accepted. These rules are not set by any single individual. They are the product of a collective, an invisible force with tremendous coercive power. We fear social punishment in many forms: isolation, condemnation, loss of reputation, even legal punishment. Conversely, we yearn for acceptance, praise, and recognition from society. The feeling of belonging to something bigger than oneself, of being part of a collective with a shared purpose and shared beliefs, is so strong that we willingly obey rules we may not fully understand or even completely agree with. This is the transcendent power Durkheim talks about, a power outside each of us individually, but one that profoundly shapes and controls our lives, just like the way believers describe an almighty God. Second point, society is the source of spiritual life. Have you ever wondered how we learn to think? We have language, ideas, and the ability to imagine abstract things. None of that comes from the isolated brain of a single individual. We acquire it through social interaction. Language is a prime example. Language is not the invention of one person, but a collective product, built and developed over thousands of generations. Without language, we cannot think in complex ways, cannot share ideas, cannot build culture, and language is the foundation of all thought. The feeling of belonging to something larger than ourselves, of being part of a group with a common destiny, generates a vast spiritual energy. Durkheim calls this collective effervescence. Think of festivals, concerts, or sports matches where thousands of people cheer, shout, and cry together. In those moments, the boundary between the individual and the collective seems to dissolve. We feel connected, lifted to a higher level. That is a profoundly spiritual experience, created by social interaction itself. It is precisely in that social space that we gain our concepts of sacred and profane, of good and evil, of life's meaning. Society provides us with a framework, a system of symbols and values through which we understand and orient our lives. Like a God who creates the world and issues laws, society creates our spiritual world. Third point, to worship symbols is to worship the collective. This is a crucial point that helps us clearly visualize Durkheim's argument. When a soldier salutes a flag, he is not saluting a piece of fabric. That piece of fabric, by itself, has no special value, but when that fabric becomes the flag of a nation, it becomes a symbol. When the soldier salutes the flag, he is saluting the honor of the nation, the glorious history of the people, the sacrifices of past generations, and most importantly, the existence of that vast collective called the nation. He is expressing reverence for a reality far beyond himself, a reality that has given him identity, language, culture, and a higher purpose. He is, in fact, worshiping society itself in the form of a concrete symbol. Similarly, in traditional religions, believers worship symbols, statues of Buddha or Christ, the cross, paintings, scriptures. These objects are not magical in themselves, but they symbolize a sacred force, a shared belief system, a community of believers. When we revere these symbols, we reinforce collective faith, reaffirm the unity of the community, and worship the very force that the community itself has created and believes in. Durkheim does not deny the existence of the feeling of the sacred. He simply says that the source of that feeling does not come from a supernatural entity outside society, but from the power of society itself when it gathers, when it creates a shared consciousness and shared spiritual life. Therefore, God is not an independent supernatural being existing somewhere out there. God, according to Durkheim, is the symbolic expression of the power, greatness, and authority of society. When we worship God, we are indirectly worshiping and reinforcing the collective that created us, nurtures us, and gives our lives meaning. This idea may sound like it secularizes religion, but for Durkheim, it is an enlightenment. It explains why religion is so enduring, why it is an indispensable part of every culture and every society from the most remote tribes to the most modern cities. Because society is always present, always powerful, and always needs symbols to see, reinforce, and glorify itself. What does this mean for us today? It means that whether or not you believe in a specific God, you are still living in a world shaped by sacred social forces. The values you hold, the symbols you respect, the communities you belong to all are manifestations of what Durkheim calls God. This is a completely new perspective, a powerful lens through which to reflect not only on religion, but also on politics, culture, and every aspect of social life. It forces us to rethink the origins of power, morality, and meaning. I believe that after listening to this chapter, you will never see God or society in quite the same way again. See you in the next chapter, where we will continue to explore more of Durkheim's profound ideas. Thank you for listening. Explosive power, the state of collective effervescence. So, what exactly is collective effervescence? Imagine this. Have you ever taken part in an event where thousands of people gather together, not just standing next to one another, but truly engaging, merging into one shared stream of thought and action? It doesn't have to be some ancient religious ritual. Think of a New Year's Eve night, with tens of thousands of people counting down every second together, waiting for the fireworks to explode. Or a rock concert with a sea of people swaying and singing at the top of their lungs to the same song. Or a football match where the entire stadium rises as one, roaring when the home team scores. Those are precisely the moments Durkheim calls collective effervescence. It is not just a crowd gathering. It is when a community, a group, a tribe interacts together, sharing an emotion, a belief, a common purpose so intensely that it generates an enormous emotional energy. The unison singing, the synchronized dancing, the echoing chants, or even a charged silence, all of these coordinated actions create a surging emotional current that spreads and multiplies many times over. What happens to us as individuals in this state of collective effervescence? When you are in the middle of that flow, your individual self seems to melt away. The boundary between you and the person next to you suddenly blurs, even disappears. You no longer feel like a solitary individual, you feel lifted, enveloped, dissolved into a larger, more powerful entity than yourself. A mysterious energy, an extraordinary force seems to flow through you, filling you with excitement, with a confidence that goes beyond your usual limits. This is not an illusion or some fleeting, meaningless feeling. Durkheim argues that it is a real and intensely powerful psychosocial experience. In those moments, the individual feels they are no longer just an ordinary human being. They feel connected to something grand, sacred, almost touching the threshold of the divine. All fatigue disappears, all doubts dissolve, replaced by exhilaration, intense conviction, and a sense of absolute safety in being part of the whole. We can easily recognize such experiences of collective effervescence in our modern lives. They are not limited to traditional religious rituals. Take the example of EDM or rock music festivals. Have you ever stood in the middle of tens of thousands of people, laser lights ripping through the night, bass shaking your chest, and everyone jumping, moving, and singing the same tune? In those moments, the boundary between you and the stranger beside you vanishes. Everyone becomes a unified mass, living in a single moment, sharing an extreme joy. It is a kind of release, a transcendent experience. Or think of a political demonstration, where thousands of voices scream the same slogan, thousands of hands hold up the same banners. That feeling of being part of a larger movement, fighting for a common ideal, gives each individual extraordinary strength to overcome fear and personal helplessness. Faith in the shared goal becomes so strong that it drives people to do things they would never do alone. And of course, we cannot forget passionate sports matches. The thunderous roar across the stadium when the home team scores, the collective sigh of relief when a narrow escape happens, or even the tears that burst out when the team wins. In those moments, the individual self completely yields to the we. The team's victory is everyone's victory. The team's sorrow is the sorrow of the entire crowd. The stadium shakes with enormous emotional energy. For Durkheim, these are not just ordinary moments of entertainment or struggle. He believes that it is precisely from such states of collective effervescence that primitive societies first sensed the presence of something supernatural and sacred. That powerful energy, Beyond the capacity of any individual, that feeling of being lifted and freed was attributed to a divine source. Because no single person could generate that energy, it must come from some external, supreme force. And that supreme force is nothing other than the power of society itself. Society creates its own gods, or more precisely, society sacralizes itself through these moments of concentrated maximal energy. Gods, spirits, sacred symbols are not entities that fall from the sky, but concrete representations, images that stand for the very power and energy of the collective. Personally, whenever I experience such collective moments, whether at a wild rock concert or a solemn community ceremony, I always feel an indescribable surge of energy, a deep connection with those around me that I rarely feel in ordinary life. It reminds us of the extraordinary power of connection, of the human capacity to create overwhelming meaning and belief when we act and exist together. Collective effervescence is not just a dry sociological concept in books. It is a vivid experience, a source of some of the most sacred things humanity has ever created. It shows us that what we call the divine, what we call absolute faith, may very well originate from our own inner strength, from the emotional energy we generate when we gather and merge into one another. And in the next chapter, we will go deeper into how these intense emotions and experiences are concretized into symbols, rituals, and ultimately shape the religions we know today. Positive rituals reinforcing the community. Durkheim does not just want us to understand that religion is, in some sense, the worship of society. He also wants to show how society maintains and regenerates its belief in itself. The answer lies in affirming rituals, or as I like to call them, positive rituals. Simply put, these are occasions when the whole community does something together, shares a particular emotion together, and thereby regenerates and strengthens belief and group solidarity. Think of it like a phone. A phone has a battery, but if it isn't charged, it runs out. Social belief is the same. It needs to be recharged constantly. Rituals are that charger. Commemorative rituals reliving the past, reinforcing the present. The first point Durkheim analyzes is commemorative rituals. When you hear this, you probably think immediately of major holidays: Lunar New Year, National Day on September 2, or Reunification Day on April 30. Yes, these are classic examples, but Durkheim sees them much more deeply. Normally, we think these holidays are simply for remembering historical events, those who have fallen, or great achievements. That is not wrong, but it is not enough. For Durkheim, the main purpose of such commemorative rituals is not just to reminisce about the past, but to relive the foundational emotions that created the community in the first place. Imagine how you feel when you, along with millions of others, celebrate New Year's Eve, watch fireworks, or immerse yourself in the jubilant atmosphere of National Day. You are not just recalling an event, you are experiencing the joy, pride, and powerful solidarity that earlier generations felt when they achieved independence or reunified the country. It is a full reliving, a complete reenactment on an emotional level. On these occasions, what we call the collective takes center stage. Individuals temporarily set aside their personal worries and differences to merge into the common flow. That collective energy, that sense that everyone is one, is what Durkheim calls collective effervescence. It is a powerful energy that makes each person feel connected, supported, and more confident than ever in the community and its shared values. Personally, whenever I join the crowd for New Year's Eve in a city center or watch a military parade on a major holiday, I feel a strange energy. It is pride, faith in a shared future, the feeling of being part of something far bigger than myself. That is how society reproduces itself, by reminding us of its origins and its purpose. Sacrificial rituals, giving up personal interests for the collective good. The second point Durkheim discusses is sacrificial rituals. Hearing the phrase sacrifice, many of you might immediately picture ancient scenes of animals being offered up, blood and fire. It seems very distant from our modern lives. But Durkheim reveals a completely different and much deeper aspect of sacrifice. He argues that offering sacrifices is not about literally feeding the gods or engaging in some material exchange with them. That is far too simplistic. The true function of sacrificial rituals is the act of giving up personal benefit for the common good, thereby tightening the bond between the individual and society. Think about it. When you sacrifice something, whether a valuable object, your time, or even a part of yourself, you are expressing a commitment. You are declaring that there is something greater than your personal interests and that you are willing to make sacrifices for it. This act of sacrifice is not just a statement. It is an invisible thread that ties you more tightly to the community and to a shared ideal. In modern society, we may no longer see animal sacrifices commonly practiced, but their essence still exists in many different forms. Donating to charity, volunteering your time for a community cause, accepting taxes, or even something as simple as obeying traffic laws to ensure safety for everyone, all of these carry a bit of the meaning of sacrifice. You give up a small part of your personal benefit to contribute to the smooth and sustainable functioning of society. And when everyone does this, everyone accepts giving up a part of themselves for the common good. The bond between each individual and society, and between individuals themselves, becomes stronger than ever. You feel yourself to be part of a unified whole, where everyone shares the same commitment. This is how solidarity is built, not by words but by concrete actions, by sacrifices made for one another. The importance of common action, uniformity, and a sense of belonging. Finally, another very important point Durkheim emphasizes is the importance of common action. This is a broader concept that encompasses commemorative and sacrificial rituals, even though they are specific forms of common action. Durkheim argues that performing a ritual together, no matter how simple, creates uniformity and a sense of attachment. Think of simple actions we perform daily in a community. For example, the flag-raising ceremony at school every Monday, or everyone standing up to sing the national anthem at an important event. Or even simpler, everyone queuing when waiting, everyone obeying shared rules in a public space. These actions seem small, repetitive, and sometimes we perform them unconsciously. But Durkheim argues that these very actions, when done collectively, create a common rhythm, a synchronization of body and mind. When everyone performs the same action, at the same time, in the same way, it creates a powerful sense of unity. It is like a choir singing together, or an army marching in step. Each individual may be a single note or a single stride, but when all merge into one shared rhythm, we create a symphony, a solid formation. In those moments, the line between individual and collective becomes blurry. You are no longer just you. You are part of the whole, part of the community. This uniformity in action strengthens belief in the existence and power of the community. It reminds each member that they are not alone, that there is a larger collective always present, sharing values and commitments. And this sense of belonging, the feeling of being part of a group, is one of humanity's most fundamental needs. So, in short, positive rituals, whether commemorating the past, sacrificing for the common good, or simply performing an action together, are like social generators. They are not just outward expressions of belief, they are powerful tools for renewing, reinforcing, and sustaining that belief. They remind us of shared values, of the community's origins, and of the sacred bond between each individual and the collective. These rituals are not relics of a backward past. They are the lifeblood of any community, from the most primitive tribes to the most complex modern societies. They are what keep society not only existing but thriving, by continually charging the invisible yet extremely strong bond of solidarity. Negative rituals maintaining separation. In previous parts, we explored the foundations of religious life, how society creates the boundary between the sacred and the profane, and how collective beliefs shape our worldview. Today, we will dive deeper into a particularly fascinating aspect: negative rituals, or more specifically, taboo. If positive rituals are about what we do to connect with the sacred, then negative rituals are about what we must not do, the limits we must obey. They are not about what we should do, but about what we should not do. It sounds complicated, but trust me, it opens up a very different perspective on the religious and social world. 1. The function of taboo: invisible walls. When we mention taboo, many people's first thought may be of punishment, of something forbidden because it is wicked or sinful. For example, forbidding the eating of a particular meat because it is unclean, or forbidding lying because it is morally wrong. But Durkheim, with his sharp insight, offers a completely different view. He says taboo is not punishment. It is more like invisible walls. Imagine this: we have a beautiful, pure sacred garden where holy things dwell. Surrounding it is the ordinary world, noisy, dusty, where profane activities occur. These invisible walls, these taboos, have one single mission: to protect the integrity of the sacred from the contamination of everyday life. Defilement here does not mean moral wrongdoing or evil, as we usually think of it. It is simply the improper mixing or contact between two realms that must remain separate. When the profane touches the sacred without proper preparation or permission, it can weaken or even destroy its sacred character. It is like pouring dirty water into a clean well. Dirty water is not evil, but it destroys the purity of the well. Taboos are the barriers that prevent this from happening. They are invisible security fences that keep the sacred truly sacred, not diluted by the ordinariness of everyday life too. Examples of taboo familiar boundaries. To make this more concrete, let's look at a few classic examples of taboo analyzed by Durkheim, which in fact we still see around us today. First are food regulations. In many religious traditions, fasting on certain days, avoiding red meat, or treating certain foods as absolutely unclean is very common. For example, Jews have kosher laws, Muslims have halal laws, and many Buddhists are lifelong vegetarians or observe vegetarian days. The purpose of these rules is not simply that red meat is bad or vegetables are nutritionally better. It is to create a boundary, a distinction in daily behavior. These dietary restrictions remind believers of another world, higher than the material world, and help them maintain a separation from earthly desires. Next is sexual abstinence. In many important rituals, or for those entrusted with spiritual responsibilities, sexual abstinence is mandatory. Monks, priests, or those preparing to take part in sacred ceremonies often have to remain pure, free from worldly desire. The purpose is to concentrate energy and mind on the sacred realm, while avoiding the mixing of a biological, profane act with the purity of the sacred. Sexuality, though a natural part of life, is in this context seen as something that might weaken the boundary between the sacred and the profane. And finally, rules about contact with sacred objects. You cannot casually touch a statue of a deity, an ancient scripture, or step into a sacred area such as a temple or shrine without strictly following regulations. Often there are specific people allowed to touch them, such as shamans or priests, and specific times and preparatory rituals, like washing hands or changing clothes. These are visible and invisible walls preventing profane intrusion into sacred spaces and objects, preserving their reverence and power. 3. The ultimate purpose: preparing for sacred connection. So what is the ultimate purpose of all this abstaining and do not do regulation? The purpose of negative rituals is to prepare individuals to enter a sacred state, ready for a meaningful interaction with the supernatural realm. It is like a process of purification, a temporary quarantine from the constraints of the profane world. When you fast, you do not just control your body, you train your will and separate yourself from material desires. When you abstain from sex, you direct your energy toward higher ideals, away from instinctual bondage. When you obey rules about touching sacred objects, you show respect and awareness of that sacred boundary. This process makes people purer in the eyes of the community and of the sacred forces, ready to receive experiences that transcend everyday life. It is not self-torture, but a way to reshape consciousness, to help people recognize their place, and to reinforce that sacred boundary in every individual's mind. By temporarily withdrawing from the profane world, people can more deeply feel the existence and power of the sacred, mentally preparing themselves to engage in the positive rituals that follow. So, through this chapter, we see that taboos and ascetic practices, negative rituals, are not arbitrary or harsh rules designed to punish. They are highly sophisticated social mechanisms designed to protect and maintain the necessary separation between the sacred and the profane. They build invisible fences not only around sacred objects, but within each person's consciousness, thus ensuring the existence and power of religious life. In the next chapter, we will explore a completely opposite aspect: positive rituals, where people actively engage with the sacred realm, creating moments of excitement and collective bonding. The social origins of thought. Take a deep breath, because what we are about to discuss will make you rethink the things you consider most self-evident. The basic categories of human thought, such as time, space, and even causality and logic, are not absolute, natural, objective concepts. Durkheim argues that they originate from social structure and religious ritual. Sounds crazy, doesn't it? Let's explore. Time, the rhythm of the community. We usually think of time as a natural, objective flow. The sun rises and sets, seasons change, clock hands keep turning. It seems to be something out there, waiting for us to measure and experience. But Durkheim says, not entirely. He argues that the time we perceive time with meaning and structure is a product of society. Think about it. How is our year divided? Not just into 4 natural seasons, but also into holidays, summer breaks, Christmas, Lunar New Year. Why are weekends Saturday and Sunday? Why do certain festivals always occur at the same time each year? For Durkheim, these rhythms are not created purely by nature, but by the rhythms of communal life. In primitive societies, time is structured by the tribe's periodic festivals and rituals: hunting festivals, harvest festivals, ancestor remembrance rituals, important social events. These collective events create temporal markers, segments, and cycles that everyone in the community recognizes and shares. When everyone participates in a major ritual, experiences collective effervescence together, and lives in a sacred moment together, that is how time is created in a meaningful way. Before clocks and calendars, these periodic rituals were the first social clocks and calendars. They not only marked the passage of time, but shaped how we feel, classify, and understand time. Time is not only physical, it carries deep social, psychological, and cultural meaning. Space, sacred centers and meaning. Similarly, space is not just an empty 3-dimensional box. We do not perceive space only physically, we also assign meaning to it. Think about your home. Living room, bedroom, kitchen. Each space has a function and a particular meaning. You don't sleep in the kitchen or cook in the bedroom, right? Or think of a city downtown, residential areas, industrial zones. Each area has its own identity and purpose. Durkheim argues that in primitive societies this organization of space is even more pronounced and rooted in the sacred. Space is organized around a sacred center. It could be a totem pole, a sacred campfire, a temple, or a holy area of a forest. Everything is arranged meaningfully based on its relation to this sacred center. The world is divided into regions with different meanings: sacred and profane zones, inside and outside, center and periphery. For example, the area where important rituals are performed is the sacred center, where divine power dwells. Everyday living areas are profane. The boundary between these two domains is very clear and often protected by strict rules and rituals. The division of space into meaningful regions is not random or based solely on geography. It reflects social structure, hierarchy, and most importantly, the religious structure of the community. The sacred is the axis, the center from which the entire meaning of space is established and maintained. Space thus becomes a living symbol of social and religious order, reason and science evolution from religious thought. And here, perhaps, is Durkheim's most crucial and shocking point. We often see reason and science, as opposed to religion, as the light of objectivity dispelling the darkness of superstition. But Durkheim argues that logic and science, which we consider the pinnacle of objective thought, are in fact direct evolutions of religious thought. It sounds insane, right? To understand this, we must recall one of religion's basic functions. In Durkheim's view, the effort of society to classify and create order out of the chaos of the world. Imagine an ancient tribe trying to understand the world around them. They need to classify animals, which ones can be eaten, which are dangerous, which are sacred. They need to classify plants, which can heal, which are poisonous, which are used in rituals. They need to classify natural phenomena: storms, droughts, rain, earthquakes. These early classifications, though wrapped in myths and sacred meanings, are essentially humanity's first attempts to create a system, a framework for understanding and controlling the environment. Religion provides the first concepts: totem species, gods representing natural forces, rules about good and evil. Durkheim argues that these elementary forms of religious thought are the first sketches of what later becomes science. Science is simply a more refined, more objective classification system based on observation and experiment instead of supernatural belief. But its roots lie in the social effort to understand and systematically organize the world, initially through a religious lens. Logic, causality, and the basic principles of scientific thinking are formed and developed from society's need to organize its ideas and experiences, originally through religion. In other words, science is not a complete negation of religion, but a transformation and refinement built on the foundation that religion laid. Both are social tools that humans use to face the complexity of reality and create meaning and order, conclusion and deeper meaning. So, time, space, and even the way we think logically, the categories we consider the foundation of our individual existence, are not absolute natural, objective entities. They are cognitive tools shaped by society, by the rituals and shared beliefs of our communities. We cannot separate our thinking from the social framework in which we live. What does this mean for you and me? It means that the way we perceive the world, the way we understand things, is never completely objective in an absolute sense. Everything is filtered through the lens of culture, society, and the historical community of which we are a part. Next time you look at a clock, navigate an unfamiliar city, or try to solve a complex problem using logic, ask yourself, are these cognitive tools purely natural, or have they been forged and passed down through thousands of generations of people living in communities, sharing rituals, beliefs, and ways of organizing the world? Durkheim opens a door for us to reconsider the very nature of human thought. He shows that to understand our own minds, we must understand society. And to understand society, we must look at the elementary forms of religious life. The journey of exploring these profound meanings is not over. In the next chapter, we will continue to examine Durkheim's legacy and his influence on modern social science. Leave your comments and thoughts about this chapter. Do you agree with Durkheim? Or do you have questions or objections? I would love to hear from you. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss other fascinating content. Death and the immortality of the social soul. Next, we will dive into a topic that perhaps every one of us has wrestled with at least once: death. But instead of viewing it through a personal lens, Durkheim will lead us down a different road, one deeply colored by sociology. That's right, this is death and the immortality of the soul in the elementary forms of the religious life. Our goal today is not to search for answers about the existence of heaven or hell, but to reinterpret the concept of the soul and immortality from a completely new angle: the social angle. Let's explore it together. The soul, it's not only yours. When I was a child, whenever I thought about the soul, I often imagined it as an invisible, shimmering or white entity that flies out of the body when we die. Something very personal, very private, bound to each individual. But Durkheim has a completely different view. For him, the soul is not just a metaphysical part of the individual. On the contrary, it is a social part constructed inside each of us. Sounds a bit hard to grasp, doesn't it? Think of it this way: all the values, beliefs, behavioral rules, and morals that we learn from family, school, friends, community, nation, that is precisely the social part of our soul. It is like a repository of collective knowledge, fragments of a shared consciousness that we absorb and carry with us throughout life. We are not just isolated individuals, we are parts of a community, and that community lives within us and shapes us. The way we think, feel, and react to the world around us is deeply influenced by the collective of which we are members. This part of the soul, according to Durkheim, is the invisible thread that connects us to those around us, to the past, present, and future of a larger group. Funerary rituals more than just grief. When a loved one passes away, the first thing we feel is grief. That grief can tear us apart, can make us feel empty. And funerary rituals arise to help us face that pain, to mourn, to say farewell. That is what everyone understands. But Durkheim points out that the meaning of these rituals is much deeper. A funeral is not only about the dead, it is primarily about the living. When a member dies, the community does not only lose one individual, it also loses a portion of its energy, a part of itself. This loss creates a hole, a disturbance in the social structure. The funeral is an occasion for the community to gather, not only to share sorrow, but also to heal the wound that this loss causes. Imagine a rope whose one strand has snapped. The funeral is the moment when the remaining strands are tied more tightly together and reinforced to ensure that the entire structure does not collapse. People come together, cry together, comfort one another, and most importantly, reaffirm their shared values and shared memories. They retell stories about the deceased, jointly reaffirm the values that person represented, and through that, reaffirm the very continuity of the community. This is a process of collective restoration, a way for society to regenerate cohesion, strengthen shared consciousness, and overcome the shock. The funeral is the most powerful proof that the community is not easily shaken by the departure of a single individual. On the contrary, it becomes stronger and more resilient. The immortality of society, a river that never stops flowing. For thousands of years, humans have always longed for immortality. We believe in an afterlife, in a place where the soul continues to exist after the body fades. That is a tremendous comfort, a hope for those left behind, helping them overcome the pain of loss. But Durkheim turns the issue upside down. He argues that belief in an afterlife, in the immortality of the individual soul, is essentially a way of expressing a deeper and stronger belief, the belief in the immortality of the community itself. We as individuals may die, our bodies may turn to dust. But the values we build together, the rules we jointly follow, the beliefs we share, in other words, the social part of our soul will continue. They are transmitted from generation to generation through education, culture, and rituals. Imagine a river. Each tiny droplet passes and disappears, but the river itself keeps flowing, carrying silt, shaping the landscape, and nurturing life. Similarly, each of us is like a droplet. We have a finite lifespan. But the community, the society of which we are a part, is like the river. It has a far more enduring existence, an immortality in the sense that it continues to exist, develop, and shape the world even when we are no longer here. Therefore, belief in the immortality of the soul, according to Durkheim, is not blind belief in a personal heaven, but a profound awareness of the endurance of the community and of the values and meanings that community creates. It is the affirmation that even if individuals die, the spirit of the community lives on, strength from connection. So, Durkheim has taken us from an individual view of the soul and death to a much broader picture. The soul is not only yours, it is part of a social current, a reflection of the community. Death is not only an ending, but also a moment for the community to reaffirm its strength and cohesion. And immortality, instead of being only a personal desire, becomes a self-evident fact of the collective. This brings a strange kind of comfort, doesn't it? Even though each individual is finite, we are parts of something far greater and more enduring. Personally, I find that this perspective truly changed how I think about death and loss. It does not erase the pain, but it helps me see a deeper meaning in continuity, in the persistence of the values we build together. And perhaps that is precisely the most elementary form of religion that Durkheim wants to talk about. Not the worship of a specific god, but the worship of the strength and immortality of the community, of the collective, of what we build together. The future of religion in the modern world. Hello everyone, we have journeyed together through Durkheim's exploration of the primitive foundations of religion. From distant indigenous tribes to the way society creates the sacred and the profane, we have gained a deeper understanding of the nature of belief and communal cohesion. Now we will do something even more interesting. We will put all those theories into a time machine and fast forward to our very own society, the modern world. This part is not just a chapter of a book. It is a large question that Durkheim would probably ask himself if he were still alive. What is the future of religion in the modern world? Or more precisely, what is the future of the sacred? Let's begin. Applying Durkheim to the modern world, where will the sacred go? First, let's briefly recall Durkheim. For him, the sacred is not necessarily about gods or supernatural doctrines. The sacred is anything that a social group regards as supreme, above all individual interests, demanding absolute reverence and even sacrifice. It is the banner that gathers people, creates unity, and most importantly, gives meaning to individual lives within the framework of the collective. So, when we look at our contemporary society, do you see a clear shift? The decline of old religions and the rise of new cults. It is undeniable that in many parts of the world, especially in developed countries, the central role of traditional religions such as Christianity, Buddhism, or Islam is gradually diminishing. They have not disappeared, but their power to shape social norms, shared values, or even the number of people participating in rituals is not as strong as before. Churches are emptier on Sundays. Old doctrines are questioned more often by science and reason. So is that space left empty? Durkheim would say no. Human nature and the nature of society always require something to worship, something from which to draw meaning and cohesion. And thus, we begin to see the rise of new forms of sacredness, which I will temporarily call modern cults. 1. Individualism, the self as a god. This is one of the most powerful cults of our time. The ego of each person becomes a deity. We worship our uniqueness, our personal success, and our own happiness. The sacred is no longer in some external entity. It lies within each individual. You can see it everywhere. Inspirational messages about loving yourself, being the best version of yourself, pursuing personal passion flood our feeds. The rituals of individualism can include self-care, going to the gym, meditating, or even posting perfect images on social media to receive praise. Worshipping the self demands that we sacrifice time and effort to cultivate ourselves. It brings a sense of freedom, but it also carries the risk of fragmentation, when each person is focused solely on their own small world too. Consumerism brands as supreme beings. Another powerful cult is consumerism, the world of brands, new experiences, and material possessions. The sacred is tied to the latest tech products, the newest smartphones, luxury cars, fashionable clothes. What are the rituals of consumerism? They are long queues at new product launches, frenzied sales hunts, unboxing rituals shared on YouTube. Brands create their own belief systems, with loyal followers ready to defend their idols. Possessing these items brings a feeling of belonging, recognition, and admiration. It demands that we sacrifice money and energy to chase material goods. But is this bond sustainable when the sacred is something finite, always replaceable by the next version? 3. Nationalism, the nation as the supreme god. And do not forget nationalism. In many contexts, the nation, the flag, and the national anthem become sacred symbols. Patriotism can grow so strong that it demands the highest sacrifice, life itself. National holidays, memorial ceremonies, military parades, and major international sports events are all rituals that generate the collective effervescence Durkheim describes. People chant the same slogans, wear the same colors, and orient themselves toward a common symbol. It brings unity, power, and pride. However, its dark side is division between nations, xenophobia, and conflict. Seeking new sacred objects where universal values converge. If the cults of individualism, consumerism, or nationalism are sometimes fragmented and self-centered, are there forms of sacredness that are more universal and able to unite humanity? I think Durkheim would suggest that we need to search for new sacred objects, things that demand respect and sacrifice on a broader scale. 1. Human rights, a new sacred value system. Human rights may be a promising candidate. This is a system of values that transcends borders, religions, and ethnicities. The right to live, the right to freedom, and the right to equality are things we consider inviolable, demanding respect from every individual and every government. When someone's human rights are violated, we feel anger and a deep sense of injustice. Movements for human rights, international organizations protecting human rights, and human rights declarations are the symbols and rituals of this religion of human rights. It requires sacrifice for justice and for the vulnerable too. Science and truth, the power of reason. In a world full of skepticism, science and objective truth are gradually becoming a new source of the sacred. The pursuit of knowledge and understanding of the universe and humankind through scientific methods is seen as a noble journey. We place trust in data, evidence, and reason. Great scientists are honored, discoveries that benefit humanity are praised. Defending truth and fighting misinformation and ignorance can become a moral duty. However, science lacks emotional richness and lacks grand rituals capable of generating widespread collective effervescence on the scale of traditional religions. 3. The environment, Mother Nature as a god that must be protected. And finally, I think of the environment. With severe climate change, our planet is becoming a new sacred object that demands protection and respect from all humanity. The Earth, Mother Nature, is no longer just a reservoir of resources, but a living entity, a shared home that must be preserved for future generations. Climate marches, wildlife conservation movements, and calls to live sustainably are the rituals and symbols of this environmental religion. It demands sacrifices in lifestyle and short-term economic interests for a higher common goal. An open question: can modern society unite? As you can see, Durkheim has given us a lens through which to understand what is happening in society. We never stop searching for sacred objects to fill the void left by traditional religions. But here lies the biggest issue. The open question Durkheim would ask: can modern society, so complex and fragmented by individualism, cultural diversity, racial differences, and political views, create new rituals and symbols strong enough to generate broad and lasting unity and collective effervescence? Are modern rituals, social media hashtags, flash mob events, advertising campaigns, or even big concerts, are they powerful enough to create deep, sacred cohesion comparable to the religious rituals of thousands of years ago? Can new symbols like reaction icons or brand logos replace the solemnity of a cross or a Buddha statue? In a world where each person is an independent, free individual, finding a common point, a sacred object that everyone can jointly worship and sacrifice for, is an enormous challenge. We have strong beliefs in human rights, in science, in environmental protection, but do we already have enough rituals, symbols, and temples powerful enough to gather and generate collective effervescence for a large number of people? Or will we continue to witness fragmentation into many small cults, each with its own sacred object and its own code of rules? Conclusion: this question is not only for sociologists or philosophers. It is for each of us, those living in this modern world. We are the ones constructing our values, beliefs, and sacred objects. This constant change is itself evidence of the correctness of Durkheim's theory: society cannot exist without some form of the sacred. The only question is what that sacred object will be and where it will lead us. Durkheim would probably nod in satisfaction to see that, more than a century later, his ideas about the sacred and social cohesion still hold their power, helping us understand what is happening in our own lives. Thank you for listening. I hope this chapter has given you many interesting reflections about the world around you. See you again in the next chapter's 7-day action. Building your own sacred community. We have just gone through a journey exploring Durkheim and his ideas about the sacred and community. Now, how do we turn those great theories into concrete actions in your daily life? I believe that we can absolutely build a deep sense of connection, a sacred community of our own, right here in the modern world. And that is exactly why we have this 7-day action plan. It is not just theory, it is practice. The goal of this plan is to help you apply insights from the book to improving your sense of connection in your life. Think of this as a small personal challenge. Day 1 to observe and identify. Let's begin with observation. Durkheim talks about totems and rituals. It may sound complicated, but in fact it is very close to us. Your totems might be the company logo you are proud of, the jersey colors of the team you support, or even the symbol of an online group you belong to. They are things that represent a group of people and shared values. Rituals. They are the indispensable Monday morning meeting, the Sunday family meal, or even the habit of having morning coffee with your best friend. And collective effervescence. That is the surge of energy when the whole company celebrates a successful project together, or when you and thousands of others cheer for your team. Your task for these first 2 days is take a notebook and a pen. Write down at least 3 totems, 3 rituals, and 3 moments of collective effervescence you have experienced in your life. Don't overthink it, just identify them. What makes you feel that you belong, that you receive positive energy from a collective? Day 3-4 create positive rituals. After identifying them, now we will actively create. Remember, Durkheim does not say rituals must be something huge or complex. Sometimes, small actions repeated regularly are exactly what build the strongest foundations for a sacred community. Over these 2 days, I challenge you to set up one small, brand new ritual and commit to doing it. For example, every morning, spend 15 minutes drinking coffee with a coworker without touching your phone. Or on Saturday night, the whole family takes a walk around the park together, no TV, no screens. Or even simpler, every day, spend 5 minutes calling a relative you rarely talk to. The goal is to create a space and time in which you consciously connect with others. Let consistency turn it into an indispensable part of your week. Day 5-6 join the crowd. We have built small connections, now it's time to expand. A key part of Durkheim's theory is experiencing collective effervescence when you immerse yourself in a crowd. This is not about feeling lost in a sea of people, but about feeling that you are part of something larger than yourself. During these 2 days, look for and participate in a community activity. It could be an outdoor concert, a sports match, a local volunteering session, or even a workshop on a topic you love. When you are there, don't just stand and watch. Open yourself up and pay attention to what you feel. What is the energy spreading from that crowd? Do you feel an invisible bond with the strangers around you? Allow yourself to experience it fully. Day 7, reflect on your sacred values. And finally, after a week of experience and reflection, we arrive at the last day, reflecting on your own sacred values. If Durkheim says the sacred is what a society regards as superior, not for sale, not to be traded off, then what is sacred to you personally? Take some truly quiet time. Write down or simply think about what in your life you consider priceless. What would you never trade away, no matter the cost? It could be family, health, conscience, honor, truth, love, or a life principle you always pursue. These are the foundational bricks, the core values that create your own sacred community. After all, we are often drawn to and want to connect with people who share those same sacred values. Cherish them, protect them, and remember that identifying them is already an important step toward building a meaningful and connected life. So we have completed the 7-day plan. I'm very curious about how your experience went. Please share it in the comments below. Tell me what you identified, what ritual you created, or how you felt when you immersed yourself in the crowd. And if you find this video helpful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other interesting content. Thank you for joining me. See you in the next videos. 3 key points: religion as a mirror reflecting society. So we have traveled together a long road, exploring the hidden corners of Émile Durkheim's thought on religion through the classic book, The Elementary Forms of the Religious Life. Now, to help you remember and share the core ideas more easily, let's summarize 3 extremely important points that Durkheim illuminated. These 3 points will show us more clearly how religion truly is a mirror reflecting our society. First point: God is society personified. The first thing Durkheim wants to tell us is that the origin of the sacred feeling, of the supernatural power we sense when standing before a god or a belief system, is not somewhere far away. It lies right in the extraordinary power of the collective, of the community of which we are a part. Think of a passionate crowd at a concert, a victorious sports team, or the sense of unity when an entire nation moves toward a shared goal. That feeling of merging into something larger than yourself, that collective power, can inspire, support, or even suppress individuals. It is this extraordinary social power that humans perceived and then personified into God, into deities, into sacred symbols. Durkheim says that when we worship a god, we are in fact worshiping our own collective power, the power of humanity, yet seeing it through a deified lens. The fear and reverence we feel toward supernatural forces are reflections of the individual's awe before the boundless power of the collective. It is not a power from outside the natural world, but an inner power born and reinforced through human interaction. Second point: rituals create reality. The second point, and personally, I find this one of the most fascinating, is this: it is not belief that creates rituals, but the shared practice of rituals that creates and reinforces belief, forging social solidarity. That sounds backward, doesn't it? We often think we must believe first, then act. But Durkheim argues that when you and others repeat an action together, a rite, a festival, a prayer gathering, a flag salute ceremony, a national anthem, singing this action generates a shared emotional experience. In those collective moments, everyone's emotions synchronize, emotional intensity is amplified, and a collective energy, what he calls collective effervescence, is produced. And it is precisely that shared emotional experience, that resonance of spirit, that forges deep belief and binds people into a single body. Symbols and stories about gods and about the community's origins are retold and reenacted through rituals, becoming unshakable truths in each individual's mind. Rituals are not only symbolic actions, they are furnaces that create social reality, where individuals are reminded of their place and role in a larger community. They are engines that maintain social order and transmit values from one generation to the next. Third point: humans are creatures who need religion. Finally, the third point is also crucial: humans, by nature, are creatures who need religion. And here, when Durkheim says religion, he does not necessarily mean only faiths with specific gods. He is talking about a deeper human need, the need to seek meaning, purpose, and a connection that transcends isolated individual existence. In whatever form, humans always need symbols to believe in, rituals to practice together, and a community to belong to. It may be a traditional religion, a political ideology, a social movement, or even a passion-based community like a music fandom, a sports club, or a book lover group. These broader forms of religion provide us with a set of values, moral rules, and a worldview. They give our lives a framework of meaning, a guiding compass, so we do not feel lost in this vast universe. We need to feel that we are part of something larger and more valuable than ourselves. That is the deepest social instinct of humanity. Without these elements, society would fall into a state of normlessness that Durkheim calls anomie, where individuals lose direction and no longer feel bonded to the community. There you have it. 3 key points Durkheim laid out in his classic work: God is society personified, rituals create reality, and humans are creatures who need religion in the literal sense. In short, religion is not a supernatural phenomenon separate from society. It is an expression, a mirror that most clearly reflects what is happening in our society: collective powers, shared beliefs, and humanity's deep need for connection. I hope that with these 3 points, you can grasp the essence of Durkheim's thought easily and share it with friends. We have gone together on a fascinating journey, haven't we? From ancient indigenous tribes with colorful totemic rituals to today's complex social structures, Durkheim has shown us an undeniable truth: humans are creatures of community, and shared belief, in whatever form, is always an invisible yet immensely powerful thread that connects us. And when I read this book, what troubled me most was how we modern people are still unconsciously creating and worshipping our own collective symbols. These symbols are not merely images. They hold shared values, expectations, dreams, and sometimes even shared fears of a group or an entire society. They produce what we call collective effervescence, an intense emotional energy that makes us feel part of something greater than ourselves. So now it's your turn. Try applying Durkheim's lens to the world. We live in a world overflowing with information, technology, and connections that may seem loose yet contain astonishing power. I am truly curious about your view of this question. In your opinion, what is the most powerful totem in our modern society? Is it the bitten apple logo of Apple, a global symbol of creativity, innovation, and a premium lifestyle that millions desire and queue for whenever a new product launches? It is not just a brand, it has become part of identity and a symbol of belonging to a group with shared values and shared faith in a technological future. Or perhaps that totem is still the national flag, a piece of cloth carrying history, battles, hopes, and sometimes the pain of hundreds of millions. Even if we differ in views or politics, when that flag flies, a sense of belonging and shared pride rises up, making us willing to do anything for its honor. It is a totem whose power has been nourished by centuries of history and stories passed from generation to generation. Or in a world that has been digitized at dizzying speed, that totem might be something seemingly frivolous and far simpler, a meme on social media. An image or a short sentence, sometimes humorous, sometimes satirical, that spreads rapidly and creates communities of shared laughter, shared viewpoints, and shared implicit understanding in an instant. A meme can connect millions of strangers, create waves of collective emotion, and sometimes even shape how we perceive a social issue. This is not an easy question, and I believe each of us will have different thoughts. Please share your perspective in the comments below. I look forward to hearing your deep analyses and personal angles, and together making clearer the invisible symbols shaping our lives today. And if you feel this content has value, if you have ever felt lost, wondered about your place in a vast world, or simply want to understand more deeply the invisible power of community and how it affects each of us, then don't hesitate to hit like on this video. Your click is not only support for me, it is also a way to spread these ideas to more people. Even more, share it with friends you think also need to hear this. Maybe a friend searching for belonging, a coworker who enjoys critical thinking, or anyone you believe will find value in a discussion about the power of community and modern totems. Let's spread ideas that help us understand ourselves better, the connections that form the society we live in, and the meaning of being part of something greater. Finally, but no less important, if you love exploring classic ideas like this, if you want to join me in peeling back the deep layers behind books and philosophies that have shaped, are shaping, and will shape our world, then press subscribe right now. Don't miss any videos, because every week we will open a new door together, stepping into another world of ideas, from philosophy and sociology to psychology and science. Become part of a community of learners, people who keep asking questions and seeking answers, people who believe that deeper understanding of the world is the key to living a more meaningful life. I believe that together we can create a truly special space for learning and sharing. Thank you very much for taking the time to watch and engage. Let's build a meaningful discussion community right here. See you in the next explorations. Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss our next videos. See you again in the upcoming journeys of knowledge.